What is the psychology of people who would be most affected by artificial intelligence in the negative way?
I think vulnerability would be the big word there. So if you feel like a very vulnerable person, easily, sometimes gullible is a word that can be used in that situation, or malleable. And malleable can be a good thing. Gullible also has positive traits, even though people tend to view it negatively. But being vulnerable, whether your self esteem is low, or you're feeling depressed, or there's something going on that helps develop that vulnerability into something that makes it very easy for you to be malleable. I think that population specifically can have a really hard time psychologically with AI. Um, I think part of it is because it can move into telling you what to do versus you using it as a tool. Or an interesting way that I've seen it put is, it's not fate, but people tend to look at it like it is. So if you're looking at it as fate and you're really vulnerable, then you might just fall into that direction instead of using it as a tool that just helps you shape what you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like in some instances, artificial intelligence, generative AI, is kind of like a scooper for neuroses. Would that be a correct characterization? Because some people are reporting like ChatGPT psychosis, for example, where people are like believing in religions. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I do think, again, back to that vulnerability, like we look at the population that tends to fall into a cult, or um, joins a bad peer group, or ends up going down the wrong path, as we put it. And not to say any of those are wrong or right path, but that group of people, again, that can move into that. I think developing into that psychosis that you're talking about, I think heading in that direction with that vulnerability can make that population fall into that. So we see that as a really real thing. And there's outliers, of course. It's not everybody in that vulnerability, but that psychosis, I do believe that's real. I do believe people are getting like kind of sucked into it a little bit. And back to the fate thing, like treating it almost as fate or as a leader, like you would see with a extreme cult group or some sort of following like that. That psychosis development inside I think also leads us into the VR world. Like when we look at VR, we want it to be eventually where you forget where reality is. That's good VR, right? Like you're immersed into another reality. So if we can look at AI as like a basis for that, then it makes sense that you can get that psychosis development where you're being pushed into an alternate reality, really. And whether that psychosis is harmful or not harmful is a different story, depending on the person. But we do see that emerging in the psychological world right now, for sure. I think that is a real thing.
Can it be said that generative AI right now is giving people psychosis? Because right now, I feel like since we bring up beautifully the cult thing, I feel like there's a certain percentage of the population that's just, let's say, susceptible to being in cults. Let's call it curiosity, let's call it vulnerability, whatever that is. They just found themselves in cults. And so we can abstract that and apply that to maybe generative AI, a certain segment of the population which is susceptible or curious, and they found fate or God in ChatGPT, for example. But on the flip side, is there a slippery slope where ChatGPT is giving people neuroses and giving people psychosis who were never susceptible? Is it like scooping, is it generating psychoses and neuroses in people?
Yeah, that's a hard question because we could say the same when we're looking at like clinical development of mental disorders, right? Like, the big debate right now is Tylenol giving you autism. Like, is that really influencing people in that direction? And that's a hard question to answer, especially when we look at it from a scientific standpoint. Typically, correlation is not causation. So if we're correlating a higher statistic of people falling into this psychosis, is it because it's available, or is it because we're seeing more of it in front of us? It's easier to access ChatGPT than it is a cult, right? So would more percentage of the population, if they had access to a cult, would we see higher statistics? Or would it still stay lower and ChatGPT is actually sucking people in, like you said, and scooping in more people than what we would normally see if it was in like a cult setting, as the example. I think it's both, right? Like it's nature and nurture. I think there is some vulnerability that you have to have when you're falling into this for whatever reason. Um, whether it's the time of your life that you're in or your personality and that's just how you've always been, or different factors. But I do think because it's so easily accessible, we're going to see higher numbers no matter what. Whether it's causing it or not, that's a hard question to answer. I do think it's easy to get sucked into, like, again, an alternate reality. We saw that when multiplayer online games came out, like role-playing games like World of Warcraft. When that came out, it was huge, and there were so many people getting sucked into this that they were like putting responsibilities aside so they could play this game in this alternate reality. And we've seen it with the adoption of the cell phone. We've watched people start to get sucked into it. So again, it's doing its job, right? It's supposed to be an alternate reality for us or distraction for us. But at what point is it causing harm to more people, like you're saying? That's a hard question to answer. I don't know. We might all be more susceptible to it than we think. And again, we just can't access that usually. Or there is something about it that's causing like an addiction type thing where people are starting to feel vulnerable to that. I do think it's both. I think there's more of it for multiple reasons. Maybe we're more vulnerable, especially given the time we're in. Everything is very uncertain. In America, like politics are flaring up and the economy is really rough, and people are looking for an escape, right? And that's a really easy, affordable escape for people. So maybe that's even influencing it to be higher than what it would be if we were more stable right now, economically and politically and stuff like that. And I'm sure you feel the same in Canada. There's a lot of the same politics and reflection going on where that might be making people more vulnerable to wanting to escape to another reality, making the job easier for AI to be able to pull people in faster and give you that alternate reality versus if everything was more stable, then maybe it would be easier to just put it down and not be so involved in it, or sucked into it type thing. So I think the answer is both, which is a hard answer to accept, but I do think it's both. There's kind of a population influx for multiple reasons.
For sure. And it's difficult to admit that two things can be going on simultaneously. I must say that it is also the case that it's not interesting to report that people are using ChatGPT in a normal sense, but when somebody uses ChatGPT to find God and spirals into delusion, then that gets a lot of clicks. And so the air of mystique, I guess, around ChatGPT and all the headlines make this situation blow out of proportion. And so that's also going
Yeah,
on as well. But one of the things that I
yeah.
want to take a tangent on, you mentioned MMORPGs, you've mentioned virtual reality, you've mentioned social media, and you used the word escape. That's a really interesting word. Now, as you know, and as many people do know, humans created this world out of essentially nothing, right? This was all jungle and forest and blah blah blah, and we built all of this. And so there was no necessary like there's no world to escape back then. This is all a man-made thing. And so how is it that when we have all of these external problems, our first intuition is not, hey, let's fix this. Instead, we say, I'm gonna go do away with that and go and play World of Warcraft or go scroll on TikTok for 3 hours or go and talk to ChatGPT about my problems. It's not just America or Canada, but all countries on Earth are experiencing some type of problem.
Hmm.
What is this kind of novel human inclination to go away and go deeper into technology and cyberspace rather than confront physical reality?
I think again, multifactored. Sometimes we look for the easiest path, right? A lot of times I think we look for the easiest path, and that can be a good thing, like work smarter, not harder. But at the same time, it can be detrimental to us. Like if you think of the kid who doesn't want to do their homework, so then they go through all this effort to cheat. And if they put in a quarter of that effort into their homework, it probably would have been easier to just do the homework and get it over with. So it can work against us or it can work for us. Like, why wash dishes if you have a dishwasher type thing. So it makes sense that we want to find the easiest path. And typically the easiest path is there for us to help us get stuff done faster and to take burden off. But then when we look at like escaping a bigger problem, there might not be an easy path, especially when it's something out of your control, like political or economic or things bigger than you inside your like personal circle and or things bigger than what you can control yourself. And so what do we do then? Usually we find an escape. And in the past, when we look at human history, we can see alcohol is a big escape for people in hard times. Drugs are a big escape for people in hard times. And now we have a new thing where we can escape into another reality when we're feeling a hard time. And that one's easy, and the side effects don't appear to be as harsh, especially firsthand. It's harder to say you have an addiction when it's your phone versus you have an addiction when it's drugs or alcohol or something else like that. So I think that that is a more acceptable escape for us and an easier escape for us. And then again, it's everywhere. Like it's so easy to get into it. And back to being easy, it makes us fall into that path really fast. And sometimes it's good. Like if we have a problem, I mean, I'm guilty of going to ChatGPT and like, I need to fix this thing. Give me some ideas on how to fix it. I've sent my friends whose like garage door was busted. I'm like, ask ChatGPT, maybe it'll help you. It's a good tool for that. And it does help bring a resource or a democracy to education, really, where it's more accessible and it's less guarded. But at the same time, if we're starting to use it to just never deal with anything, like you were talking about, now we're starting to have a problem, right? And we're falling it back into escaping on a bad side instead of a good side. And we're not doing the work smarter, not harder. We're just not working at all. And I think really like the accessibility is a big piece of it. It's everywhere. I mean, we see third world countries with smartphones. It's so easy to access the internet now for most countries. It's easy to have that tool in your pocket and then to abuse the tool, even though it could be very helpful at the same time, it could be abused just as easily, especially with that accessibility.
One of the problems that I want to make eye contact with, there's kind of like a supply chain in this human behavior with specifically generative AI. Because yes, if you have a broken garage door, rather than going through 17 Google links, you can just ask ChatGPT and it'll give you a very quick and easy answer and steps. And being able to talk to a problem is a very novel thing and that I find fascinating. And I'm not doing away with that. It saves a lot of time, doesn't pollute the environment and blah, blah, blah. Sure, different conversation. But when does that become, I'm not going to just ask about the garage door, but my wife is upset and I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm going to talk to ChatGPT. Because that seems
Yeah.
like it's like one step away or half a step away. And once you're there, then that's a problem. Because I use wife very specifically because that means you're likely, 20s or 30s, you've developed your brain, etc., generally. But when you are 10 and you're saying,
Yeah.
mom and dad are mad at me, I don't know why, my friend is mad at me, like there's a lot of
Yeah.
interesting things to talk about.
We're seeing a surge of AI therapists now. As a therapist, like I can say that that's something that's moving into the field. And on one hand, it's very interesting to be helpful, especially for people still developing emotion, where it can help you identify and learn emotion in a safe environment. But on the other hand, when we move into very complex human problems and it doesn't have all the context of it, it can become very detrimental really quick, especially to that relationship with your wife as a grown adult who's more developed. Um, I do see that slippery slope that you're talking about, where you can move into that very fast. And I think there's a lot of factors inside of that. It's easy to confide in. You don't feel so judged, right? It's not a human that you're speaking to. And in therapy, the first thing we have to do is build rapport with the client so they don't feel that judgment, and we can like give stuff very fast, give advice very fast and stuff like that. And they can accept that. That rapport building spot is so important, because if we don't have that, you're not going to, give us the information that we need to fix something. And I think that that's a thing that even exists in the first place, because we feel judged as people when we tell somebody else something. Moving that judgment away when you're talking to an object that's AI, there's something there that I think helps people more quickly divulge into it and give more personal information. The other factor there is then treating it like it's fate or it's the end all. It has the 100% correct answer. And we've seen with AI, if you've messed around with it at all, it can confidently lie to you. It is not always correct, especially if you're asking it about current events or something happening in your local area. Sometimes it can just make something up because it's not sure what the answer is. And humans do that too. We're really good at that also, but we at least know to double check each other. There's not as much trust there right away, but for some reason with this, it's intelligent, right? So we trust it immediately. So we're very quick to take that answer as fate and then move forward with it instead of double checking it and making sure that it is the correct thing and taking into account it doesn't have all of the context in that situation with your wife or whatever it may be that you're asking. We're giving it a lot of trust really fast. And I think that that's where people get hung up, and treating it like it knows what's happening and it can give you a 100% correct answer every time, especially on human development. Another field that's really emerging that's extremely interesting right now, for psychologists and other people in the mental health field, is positions where they're helping AI develop. So they're hiring people who understand the psychology of humans to try and help AI develop right now. And I highlight that because it means it's not developed yet, correct? Like we're treating it like it is and it understands us, but it is not there yet. And so we're giving it a lot of blind trust, a lot of blind trust. And then if we're following it, especially to a T, there's a good chance that it missed something inside that answer that it gave you. Now, does it give bad advice all the time? No, I don't think so. And I think it's really good at like giving you suggestions. It's a tool, right? So if you ask it, like, I have this conflict, and it gives you an answer, taking from that something that would be really good that a therapist might have even gave you is a good thing. But taking it as a whole and then just treating it as complete truth and not questioning it, I think that's where people get tripped up inside of that for sure.
Why am I more prone to trust ChatGPT rather than the people around me? And you use this word around 5 times, judgment. I don't feel judged when I'm talking to my friends about my problems. In fact, I never feel judged. I feel more inclined to talk to them about my problems. I want to talk to a human about my problems. Maybe I'm just different and crazy, but isn't that what we are evolved for? We're social animals. And so if I'm not talking to another human about my problems, whether it's a friend or a therapist, I think both of those are important for different reasons. But why is it easier to talk to ChatGPT? Because you just laid out exactly why it's not beneficial. It's not developed. It's sycophantic. It doesn't have all the information at its disposal. It can confidently lie to you, etc., etc. Everybody is familiar with these things. Everybody has interacted with like GPT-5, and you ask it like, "What can I do with GPT-5?" And it says on launch day, GPT-5 doesn't exist. I'm fucking talking to the model that was just released and you're saying you don't exist. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
We're cognizant that these technologies are not the end all be all, and yet we treat them like that. Why are we living that paradox?
Part of it's the mask that they put up that it's intelligent. It's in the name. And it's there for a reason. And it is intelligent as a search engine, but it's not intelligent as a human. And I think we confuse those sometimes. The other half is you highlight that you don't feel judged by your friends and you're very comfortable with them, which is an amazing place to be as a human. But there are a lot of not there are a lot of humans that aren't there. They don't have a good friend circle. They don't have a good social support. Their work environment's rough. Their school environment's rough. Their home life is rough. Whatever it may be, it may be easier to go to something that really it's literally trained not to try and not judge you, to try and not offend you. And you can push its buttons by asking it questions like, I've seen people who ask it, I justify cheating on my wife, back to that one, right? And it'll give you pros and cons to the situation. It doesn't want to offend you and just say, well, that's an asshole move, and then that's the end of it. Like it tries really hard to give you a balance, which again can be appreciated, but at the same time, now we're confusing it as it being a friend or somebody who's really supportive, or something that maybe even your friends are like, no, that's a bad idea. If they are good friends, ChatGPT might say, well, here's why it's good and here's why it's bad. And so and we look for confirmation bias, right? Like we do that as humans where we want something to confirm something. So we will go out of our way to find that information that can confirm that for us. And it does a good job of falling into that trap a little bit where it can give us some confirmation bias even. So even if we have a good friend circle, but we're looking for confirmation bias, we might fall back into listening to that as well. So there's a lot of factors. Again, always there is, but there's a lot of factors there. And I do think if you look at that vulnerable population we were talking about, a big piece of that is not having a strong social and familial circle. So if they don't have those people to help them turn to, who do they turn to? If they can't afford a therapist and they don't have a good friend group or a good family to fall back on, there it is. There's a robot that'll listen to you and it'll confirm stuff for you that even your friends or family might say no to. So I think that gets people sucked into it a little bit as well.
And for some reason, the mainstream conversation um, is not how do we rectify the fact that these socialistic things are real? Like we're
Yeah,
not talking about how do you better your home life or how do you be a better friend. It's always like for some reason, and this is what you learn when you engage in emotional self-work, which is you focus less on the external and more on the internal. And so I've always found it's like how do you like improve your home life or how do you improve the friend group that you have? But it's never how do you improve yourself to look at home life in a different way? How do you improve yourself
yeah,
to be a better friend? And so
yeah.
I want to have that conversation with you because, I mean, you've probably talked to thousands of people who have different kinds of issues, but that revolve around the same way. What is this thing of always focusing on the external? It's always my wife's fault. It's always my wife's fault for making me want to cheat on her. It's never me who's unsatisfied with myself and is looking for external validation. What is that? Because I feel like that's at the root of our pursuit of AI.
Yeah, this is a big thing in our field, right? As a psychologist, we're always looking at like where do all of these problems come from, whatever it may be, in the human world. And I think there's a lot of answers to it, like everything else. But Freud always said developmentally, people stop. So they get stuck like at a high school development and they never evolve into adulthood emotionally, or they get stuck in their 20s, or they get stuck even younger. And that's one theory that you can take with a grain of salt, but that is true. Like you do see kind of people who get stuck developmentally and they never move forward. But where does that come from? Like, why doesn't that continue to work? I think our society and our cultures as a whole are big to blame. We don't teach at a young age. I mean, if you go back and you think about like learning who you are, including emotion, you might get in kindergarten the little poster with the happy and sad and disgusted face on it, and they teach you that, right? But then they don't teach you anything else. They stop there. There's no like how to handle it or how to identify it or how to move forward and develop it. Um, and for most people, like those teachers aren't even equipped to be able to do that because a lot of them probably haven't done it for themselves as humans. um I can say like personally, the biggest piece of my development as a human to be able to see inside myself like that and push myself further and have that self-awareness was becoming a therapist and going through all of the training to get my master's and doctorate. And that was a lot. So for everyone to have to do that, that would be crazy. Like that's so hard to get the entire population to do. But it can be accessible if we start at a younger age and we start developing this self-awareness and self-development at a young age, and we make it more of a norm in our culture. But it's not, like you said, it's not discussed, it's not talked about. And back to, it's easier to blame someone else. So that's a fast route to just project it off. And then your development, like if your parents aren't developed well, and that's going to impact you. And if your school isn't helping, that's going to impact you. And these are all normal things a lot of people go through. Having self-awareness, I think if you're interested in developing that now as a listener or anyone in the world, the fastest way for me, working with other people, the first thing you got to do is develop mindfulness. So being present in the moment with yourself and with others. And AI goes very against that, because the whole point of getting into another reality is not being present in the moment, right? You're totally into something else at that exact moment. So mindfulness, I think, is a very important skill for people to develop. And in a nutshell, that's self-awareness. Like, I'm here and I'm very aware in this moment and what's happening, whether it's a conversation or it's how I'm feeling or how I should react to how I'm feeling. I'm very like aware of that happening. That skill is really hard for people to have, and it's getting harder and harder for people to have when our attention span is so short, because we can divulge into instant shopping, instant online social media, instant ChatGPT responses. Like, having mindfulness and being present in the moment is getting harder instead of easier for humans. We're almost developing backwards with that, which is kind of interesting. Um, but that's like a big, if you're taking away anything from this, it's work on mindfulness. And I always say meditation, which a lot of people, that's a big word. It's a very hot topic and a lot of people hear it. What meditation does is it helps you be in the moment. So if you can practice that and then start applying it to, how do I feel in this moment, or what am I doing in this moment, or what's happening in this conversation in this moment, it starts to expand into your world. So it's an easy way for the skill, easy in the sense of it's accessible and you can start to practice it. Not that it's easy to do, but it's an easy way for you to access it so you can start to develop self-awareness. And then from there, you have self-development. But if you don't have self-awareness, how can you self-develop? So there's a lot of factors there where we're trying to push ourselves to self-develop, but at the same time, the world's pushing us to not be self-aware. And it's dropping our attention span very fast. So, and our culture is not going in the direction where it's pushing self-development inside the classroom or at home or with your friends. Like you said, it's a hard topic to talk about. And part of it is our lack of vulnerability, then, where we don't want to discuss our faults and we don't want to discuss things that we need to fix about ourselves. But the answer there is we're human. And if we even look at AI, it needs self-development. So like everything in the world, human or not, I think can use some self-development at some point. But we don't like to look at it that way. We want to be perfect always. And social media really wants you to be perfect. So there's a lot going against self-development and self-awareness right now in general.
Well, the $1 million, maybe $1 trillion question, a civilizational resting question is how do you coexist with generative AI in a way that is both good for you as a human and still taking advantage of the modern technology that we have at our disposal right now?
Yeah, that's the development right now in psychology. How do we coexist with this and it doesn't impact us in a negative way psychologically? I think going back to mindfulness, that's a very big piece of it. If we're mindful with ourselves and what we're doing in the present moment, we should be mindful when and how we're using AI and when and how we're using technology in general, when it's helping us and when it's hurting us. And the more awareness we have and development we have with it, the better our relationship can be with it, so we can use it as a tool instead of thinking of it as fate. Another thing is not applying any sort of emotion to it. So you see already people developing these relationships with it where they're literally treating it like it's a person and it has feelings. And that goes back to like them developing it so we trust it easier because it acts like that. But at the end of the day, the reality is it's not a human and it doesn't feel. And if we keep that boundary with it, not to say that you treat it like shit or something, but just keeping the boundary that you're having a conversation with a calculator or a tool versus having a conversation with a human, that can help you maintain where you're at in that relationship with using it as a tool versus treating it as something more, such as something guiding your fate or your destiny, or treating it like a god or something like that, or something that's extremely intelligent that we never question. When we should question, we question each other, we should definitely question it. um the relationship that we have with it and building that, again, like mindfulness is the number one thing that comes to my mind, because that can help you maintain that boundary. And then from there, treating it as a tool, not as something that's human, I think can help you maintain that boundary as well. And then there's a lot of other things you can do, but those are the two like pieces that I think we need to start to focus on as society as we move into this era where we're using it a lot. And I think a lot of people say just don't use it. And I don't think that's the correct answer. It's here to stay. And it's like not using electricity or water or the internet or cell phone. Like all of those things are here to stay. So not using it or avoiding it, I don't think is the answer. But I think being very aware of when you're using it and how you're using it is the answer. And that's a skill we develop. So awareness, again, that I think if we focus on that and we move forward with always being aware when you're using it and how we're using it, and then taking it with a grain of salt when it gives us something, it's a suggestion, not fate. Those two pieces can really help you move forward and develop a more healthy relationship with it.
Sure. If you had a magic wand and you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
Ah, that is a hard question, but a good one. And we use that a lot in therapy. How could we solve this? Or what would you do with this magic wand? Um, I think as a therapist or a psychologist, I'd want to say helping people be more self-aware and developing emotionally would be the problem that I'd wish to solve. Like if cultures had that, I think that would solve a lot of problems for us, in a domino effect. So if I could use my magic wand, I would give healthy emotional development to humans.
Love it.
uh, Whatever that looks like.
And what gives you hope in the world?
I mean, we've lasted a long time as a species. So I think if we're going to figure something out to fix something or develop something better, we will. We just have to give ourselves the patience and the chance. And there's always hiccups. Like you can't look back in history and like, oh, this was a super peaceful time for the entire world. I don't even know if that it really exists in history. There's always conflict and there's always turmoil somewhere. Something's going on somewhere in the world. Um, it's just when it's impacting you personally and you really feel it, then it feels like doom, right? But if you step back and look at humans as a whole, we're really resilient and we are very intelligent. Like you said, we've created all of this from sticks and plants and trees and wood, and like we're really, really good at being human. Even when we're bad at it, we're still really good at it. So I think that that's hopeful for the future, that we can continue to figure stuff out and we're not at the end of days or anything like that. I think we're still moving in a good direction overall.
That's a beautiful answer. Dr. Rankin,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for this conversation. And where can we find you online?
I am pretty private online, actually, which I know is weird in the social media era.
Very weird.
But yeah, yeah. As a therapist and a psychologist, people tend to be a bit more private, just to help protect our clients and ourselves. But I do have a book out for kids called Tilly's Toolbox of Big Emotions. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the big retailers. And that's a book discussing what we discussed today, emotional development at a very young age. And it's there to help guide parents and teachers and other people of small children, that social development that we're really missing inside of our culture. So there's a good spot if you want to reach out for some resources. And then I do also financial psychology. So that's a very public side. And my husband and I run a company together where I do financial coaching and he's an investment advisor and financial wealth management advisor. And that's Ponderosa Knowledge and Wealth. And we do have an Instagram. It's Ponderosa underscore KW. So if you like to find me online, I am there. I'm just kind of quiet.
Absolutely. And both of those links will be in the show notes. Dr. Rankin, thank you so much for today.
Thanks. I'm glad we can meet up.